All right, we have some breaking news that requires complete moral clarity. Now, this one is personal because Donald Trump just announced that the Texas National Guard is getting ready to mobilize into the city of Chicago. This is entirely unprecedented, but also illegal. You cannot mobilize a National Guard against U.S. citizens, according to the Posse Comitatus Act that was written during the Civil War. On top of that, why is Donald Trump mobilizing the National Guard of one state against another state? Why is Governor Greg Abbott rolling over and allowing this to happen, allowing the redistricting to happen, and allowing Donald Trump to spark almost a soft Civil War-esque situation? And I don't want to call it that. I know that is a very inflammatory term, but what else do you call it when the National Guard of one state is being mobilized to another state? The Texas National Guard preps for Chicago deployment as Fed stage in north suburbs, Governor Pritzker says. And we're going to break all of this down. Just remember, the Mockler Media HQ is stationed in Chicago. We'll be on the ground covering this. I'm currently out of studio. I'm helping my parents with some more personal stuff, but I'll be back in studio tonight in Chicago covering all of this as it happens. So make sure you subscribe below. And before I even read this article about the anticipation expected for the surge in ICE troops and National Guard troops, I just want to say, if you want to actually solve crime in Chicago, what you do is you work with local leaders, not intimidate local leaders. You provide resources, not take resources away like this. The Trump administration slashed federal funding for gun violence prevention, and then use violence as a pretext to just mobilize the National Guard and see how far you can get. Quote, "We're going in," Donald Trump said. "I didn't say when we're going in. If the governor of Illinois would called me up, I would love to do it. We are going to do it anyway." Donald Trump is deploying the National Guard into Chicago without the consent of anybody living there or the governor or any of the lawmakers. He is intimidating them rather than coordinating with them, which is the key problem. Take a listen to him just saying, "We're going in. We don't care."
He said,
Make your mind up on Chicago, though?
well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When we lose, when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks and 75 are shot with bullets.
Shot with bullets. You're not protecting the city, Trump. You are militarizing the city against its own people and making it an uncomfortable environment. I want to repeat this one more time. If this were about crime and protecting Chicago families, he would be working and coordinating with local leaders, not trying to intimidate them. You can support investments into community infrastructure, programs, education, things that are statistically proven to prevent crime from a young age throughout people's lives. Ahmed Baba points out, every time I tune into Fox News today, they're fear-mongering about crime in Chicago, priming their audience in the event that Trump deploys troops there, in spite of the fact that the city is seeing significant declines in crime this year. Exactly. What Fox News does is they intentionally prime their audience by showing clips of violence repeatedly, over and over, and then when things do happen, the National Guard is deployed, the audience says, "Oh, that makes sense. I saw about that." I mean, look at this. Jeffrey Epstein survivors were being covered on CNN. Credit where credit is due. Jeffrey Epstein survivors were being covered on MSNBC. But when it comes to Fox News and Fox Business, they were showing clips of China. They were showing Chicago crime. They are trying so desperately to control the narrative, and that's why we push back on this channel. Joe Walsh said, repeat after me, Trump cannot deploy the National Guard to Chicago. He does not have the constitutional authority to do so. National Guard troops outside of D.C. are not his to command. And that is the key part right there. It is authoritarian to even threaten this. But the United States passed the Posse Comitatus Act after the Civil War to ensure that presidents could not just turn the U.S. military into their own domestic police force that goes around, kidnaps people, and harasses people. That's what Trump's doing. And look at, in Chicago, on Labor Day, there were protests of people saying, "No troops, no to the troops."
No troops in Chicago! No troops in Chicago!
That was led by Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who hasn't been the most popular. Listen, I live in Chicago and I talk to a lot of people. Even people who are blue voters are like, he hasn't been the most popular. But he is meeting the moment and he is expressing the will of the people by saying no troops in Chicago and leading that chant. Representative Brad Schneider says, "This threat to Chicago does not help solve crime in our communities. He's terrorizing a welcoming community." Literally. There are absolutely things we can do to make communities safer. And let me be explicit. I'm against crime. Democrats are against crime. Criminals are inherently bad. It's illegal to commit crime. We want to minimize the amount of crime. The argument that we're making is that you can't do that through willy-nilly mobilizing the National Guard. And even if you can temporarily minimize the amount of crime, it is in no way, shape, or form a long-term solution. Representative Brad Schneider then says, "There are things we can do to make communities safer. That includes releasing the anti-violence funding that Trump continues to block." It's funny because for all the people that screamed about liberals wanting to defund the police, which no one wanted to do, defunding the police, removing funds from the police, in my opinion, is idiotic. Now, people make the argument that by defund the police, we actually just mean reallocate the funding of money. And I understand the argument, but just don't call it defunding the police. We want to reallocate funding or even fund the police more so they have better training, body cameras that are necessary, psychological evaluations, there are more safety mechanisms, maybe even third-party investigators so they're not investigating themselves. This thing requires more funding. The point is, Trump has actually blocked funding from being released to the police force. He has defunded the police and slashed federal funding for gun violence protection. In Chicago, the Trump admin has terminated more than half of all federal funding for gun violence prevention programs in the United States. This has happened in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore. He does this in July, then in August he mobilizes the National Guard and consolidates power. You know what really bothered me? Joe and Mika from Morning Joe were saying that J.B. Pritzker should work with Trump to mobilize the National Guard, and let me just summarize their argument in a way that's fair. People say, like Joe and Mika, that when American citizens are walking through the street, they're more scared of criminals or theft than they are of the military. That if you're walking through the street with your family and there's a guard standing there, it's less scary than a criminal. Now, the polling doesn't show that. The polling shows that people are more scared, more uncomfortable when the military is out. But even if we were to grant that, why would we concede the President of the United States the ability to mobilize the National Guard when it doesn't fix crime for a long term? It all does not make sense. Take a listen to their theory.
I actually think that J.B. Pritzker should do something radical. I think he should pick up the phone, call the president, and say, you know and I know you don't have the constitutional authority to deploy the National Guard here and to police my. You can do that in D.C., you can't do that in Chicago. But let's partner up. These are the most dangerous parts of my state. We would love to figure out how to have a partnership that's constitutional, that respects the sort of balance of federalism between the federal government and the state government. And let's work together to save lives.
Saving lives is good, of course, but deploying the National Guard and militarizing the streets of Chicago isn't saving lives long term. I hate when people simplify things like this. Like when people talk about the war between Russia and Ukraine, they say, peace is good. We want peace. And it's like, yeah, no shit, peace is good. Everybody thinks peace is good. But when you're saying that and then saying both sides need to go for peace, it's like you're playing a game that is very, very slippery because Russia is the one invading. Ukraine is the one who has repeatedly agreed to peace. The same way here when he says, yeah, people should be safer. We should lower crime, save lives. Of course we want to save lives. Everybody wants to save lives. But when Donald Trump is unilaterally mobilizing the military, it's insane. Mike Nellis, another Chicago dude, speaks on behalf of Chicagoans. Take a listen.
Chicago's had a chance to vote for Donald Trump 3 times, and he lost by 80% each of the 3 times that he was on the ballot. I think if Donald Trump wants to get involved heavily in issues somewhere else, he should go look at red states, because Donald Trump doesn't have any urgency to deal with Louisiana, which is the murder capital of the United States. He doesn't have anything to say about Oklahoma, which has the worst schools in the nation. Doesn't have anything to say about Arkansas,
Mike,
which has the highest teen pregnancy rate.
those are crime-ridden too. Those are crime-ridden too. And if the mayor
when's
wants
Donald
to
Trump going
invite
to do
Donald
something
Trump
about the
to
crime
go in
rid
there
that's
and do
happening
it.
in Republican
Chicago's a little bigger than Baton Rouge, Mike, okay? And you live in Chicago, and you should care. Did you hear my friend out there in the monologue talking about her cousin, her uncle, her niece? They're all dead, Mike. Do you care about that at all? Your mayor doesn't care. Your mayor doesn't want any backup. They're offering him more cops, more guard, and he says, no, more housing. What the hell's wrong with him?
Hey, listen, I care about the crime that happens in Chicago, but I also care about making sure that people feel safe. And I know that I'm not going to feel safe in my city if when I take my son to school, I have to drive by a tank. I know I'm not going to feel safe if when I take him to a ball game, I'm going to see armed military members.
I agree, and that's the defeater to the argument. People feel less safe with the military. All polling shows that. Check out Governor J.B. Pritzker pointing out this is not normal. Nothing about this is normal.
Especially to the press. I refuse to pretend that any of this is normal. I refuse to concede that the abject cruelty that we're seeing play out with the execution of Trump and Stephen Miller's policies are okay or justified. I refuse to fall into the pundit trap that demands we sacrifice vital constitutional rights if it's being done in the fake guise of fighting crime. Because, as I said 6 months ago in my State of the State address, any rational person who has spent even the most minimal amount of time studying human history has to ask themselves on one important question. Once they get the citizens of this nation comfortable with the current atrocities committed under the color of law, what comes next?
Very well said from Governor J.B. Pritzker. And I just want to end this off by saying the troops are not welcome in Chicago. The immigration raids are not welcome in Chicago. Chicago is not the enemy of the United States or the enemy of the people. Chicago is a beautiful, beautiful city. It's part of the backbone of the Midwest as well. Let me know what you guys think about Chicago in the comment section. I really do love it. I mean, the idea that Chicago would bow down to this is absurd. Chicago's survived fires, pandemics, other crime waves in the past, sure, but crime is going down in Chicago year over year over year. The National Guard being mobilized is a pretext for much more sinister actions, and I'm going to leave it there. If you appreciate the videos we make, drop a like, subscribe. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace out.